Welcome to our presentation for our game, Nefarious Voyage. Nefarious Voyage is an on-rail shooter set in space where the player takes control of the ship's gun turrets to defend themselves from enemy spaceships and other hazards found within the game. The ship has two different turrets that the player will have to switch back and forth to defeat the enemies and protect their ship. The game will feature an energy management system that will add some complexity to the game. That will be discussed later on in the presentation. For our game, we took inspiration from games such as Child of Eden, Star Fox 64, and Modern Warfare 2 and 3's on-rail shooter sections of those respective games.
There had been a revolt, and in an effort to avoid revolution and bloodshed, the government allowed them and their families to create a colony, Tuonela, on the planet's surface. People can still petition and be approved to go to Tuonela. At least, that is what everyone was told. Our main character is a historian who was studying the near revolution and the colony Tuonela. He runs into an old man who starts ranting that Tuonela is a lie, until enforcers drag him away. The historian follows and finds out Tuonela is the euphemism for euthanizing people. He runs home, but he has already been seen, and the enforcers get to his home and take his wife and son. He hops into his spaceship, Elegua, to find his family and uncover the truth.
The core mechanics in Nefarious Voyage involve turret swapping, rail movement, firing the turret, and managing the energy system. The player movements are fixed to a predetermined path, which restricts the player to being able to move to only two locations, which are the locations of the turns. Through the first few levels of the game, you will be directed to whichever gun you need to control so that you get a good understanding of turret fire and swapping. You have a choice between firing either turret you want at any time, since enemies are going to be coming from the front and rear view, depending on the level you're on. The energy management system is where the player can choose to direct energy towards the protective shields or the turrets to make them more powerful. If the player chooses to direct energy towards the shields, it will give the ship a higher defensive rate towards enemy weapons, but this transfer of energy will make the turrets weaker. If the player chooses to apply the energy to the turrets, they will become stronger and faster. This results in weaker shields, which will make the player more vulnerable for attacks and will take a great amount of damage.
For Nefarious Voyage, we've broken the game into 3 levels so that we can ease the player into the action. The first level will consist of the tutorial as well as the game's most basic enemies. The tutorial will be delivered by the AI computer within the player's ship. The enemies the player will encounter are asteroids, mines, tracking mines, and dumb pilots. The second level will consist of more advanced enemy ships that will force the player to use the energy management system more efficiently. This level also includes a mini-boss at the end that the player must face in order to proceed. Our third and final level will consist of the final boss fight to our game. The final boss fight will feature multiple stages of attack patterns and will require the player to use all of their skills that they have learned throughout our game to defeat it. We feel that this level structure will best serve the player and will help them to hone their skills over the course of the game. This way, by the final boss, the player is more than prepared to handle.
We have 6 non-boss type enemies in our game: debris and asteroids, homing mines, dumb pilots, ace pilots, shielded pilots, and heavy gunner. Our debris and asteroids are stationary and moving in a fixed direction. These give realism to our game, but also get the player used to shooting an object, and they can damage the player's ship. Homing mines are a step up from debris and asteroids. They're stationary, but when the player's ship gets in close, they start moving towards the player's ship and explode within close range. Our dumb pilots get the player used to enemies shooting at him. They fly in a predefined direction, but they're also predefined whether they will or will not shoot at the player. Our ace pilots are a graduated form of the dumb pilots. They fly in a predefined direction. All of them will shoot at the player, however, they will antagonize the player like a fly once in close. Our shielded pilots and our heavy gunner are advanced form of the ace pilots. They fly like the ace pilots, but are slower than the ace pilot. The shielded pilot does light damage. They have strong shields and gets the player used to using the special gun ability, while the heavy gunner is the opposite. They have heavy guns, light shield, and gets a player used to using their special shield ability.
So coming up with a boss fight on an on-rail shooter is a bit of a challenge since the player cannot move the ship's direction itself. So what we try to do is, one, give a sense of breaking the pace of an on-rail shooter. So the player itself is actually stationary for a moment in the first boss, for example, and the actual boss is rotating around the player. What this forces the player to do is it's actually use those shields and weapon systems appropriately, so that the whenever the boss is attacking from the front or the back, the player has the opportunity to shift the focus on the shield in one direction or another. For the second boss, we also fighting a much bigger ship, and the on rails movement it's definitely changed. So the player itself is circling around the ship, and it is waiting for a specific moment where the boss drops his shields and the player can finally attack that boss, while dodging multiple ships being launched by this boss, and managing his shields whenever he's in front or in the back of the action.